The year was 1914. The world was on the brink of a transformation that no one could have predicted. Europe, a place full of powerful countries and big dreams, was about to face a huge disaster. The continent was a tapestry of alliances and rivalries, with each nation vying for power and influence. The air was thick with tension, and the political landscape was a powder keg waiting to explode. Countries didn't trust each other and had been rivals for years. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was the spark that ignited the flames of war. This single event set off a chain reaction, pulling nation after nation into the conflict. Almost no one saw coming the terrible war that was about to start. A war so destructive, so world-changing, that it would forever be known as the Great War. The alliances that had been formed for protection now became the very mechanisms that drew countries into the fray. The world watched in disbelief as the conflict escalated. This was World War I. It was a war that involved more than 30 nations and resulted in unprecedented levels of destruction and loss of life. For 4 long years, the world watched in horror as everything changed. The war was fought on multiple fronts, with soldiers enduring unimaginable hardships. Millions of soldiers went to fight in a new kind of war, a war fought not in open fields but from ditches dug in the mud. These trenches became the defining symbol of World War I, representing the grueling and stagnant nature of the conflict. Life in the trenches was harsh, with soldiers facing constant threats from enemy fire, disease, and the elements. Technology, meant to make life better, brought death on a scale never seen before. The war saw the introduction of new weapons and tactics, including machine guns, tanks, and chemical warfare. These advancements made the battlefield more deadly and transformed the nature of combat. Airplanes, once a novelty, became instruments of war, used for reconnaissance and bombing raids. When the fighting finally stopped in 1918, the world map was different, and humanity itself seemed changed forever. The war had redrawn borders, toppled empires, and left deep scars on the collective psyche of nations. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war, imposed harsh penalties on Germany and sowed the seeds for future conflicts. This is the story of that war, what caused it, the important things that happened, and how it changed the world. It's a story of pride and mistakes, of bravery and sacrifice, and how easily peace can be broken. The lessons learned from World War I continue to resonate today, reminding us of the fragility of peace and the devastating consequences of war. It's a story of pride and mistakes, of bravery and sacrifice, and how easily peace can be broken. The war left an indelible mark on those who lived through it, and its legacy is still felt a century later. Memorials and cemeteries around the world stand as solemn reminders of the cost of conflict. It's a story that, even 100 years later, still feels important. The Great War reshaped the world in ways that continue to influence our lives today. By understanding its causes and consequences, we can better appreciate the importance of striving for peace and the dangers of allowing history to repeat itself. To understand the Great War, we must delve into the complex web of events and emotions that led to its outbreak. The early 1900s in Europe was a period of intense political maneuvering and alliances. Leaders of various nations were engaged in a delicate dance of diplomacy, trying to outmaneuver each other while maintaining a fragile peace. Europe in the early 1900s was like a box of matches ready to explode. The continent was a hotbed of military parades and displays of power, with each nation showcasing its might and readiness for conflict. Nationalism, a strong feeling of pride in one's country, was on the rise. This fervent patriotism often turned into a disdain for neighboring countries, creating an atmosphere of mutual distrust and hostility. The major European empires were in a race for global dominance, seeking to expand their territories and influence. This quest for power led to the colonization of vast regions, often resulting in conflicts and rivalries among the empires. Militarism was another significant factor. Many European countries were heavily investing in their military capabilities, focusing on building large armies and developing advanced weaponry. This arms race created a sense of impending conflict. The rapid development of new weapons and military technology meant that nations were constantly trying to outdo each other. This technological race only heightened the tensions as each country sought to gain a strategic advantage. Despite the growing militarization, many people saw their country's military strength as a source of pride and security. Parades and celebrations of soldiers were common, reinforcing the belief that a strong military was essential for national defense. However, this build-up of military power also led to a climate of fear and suspicion. Diplomatic relations were strained, and even minor incidents had the potential to escalate into major conflicts. In an attempt to secure themselves, countries formed alliances, promising to defend each other in case of an attack. These treaties were meant to deter aggression, but they also created a complex web of obligations. The alliances were supposed to maintain peace, but they had the opposite effect. Instead of preventing war, they made it more likely, as any conflict involving one country could quickly draw in its allies. The stage was set for a large-scale conflict. If one nation went to war, its allies were bound by treaty to join, potentially dragging the entire continent into a devastating war. Everything was ready. All that was needed was a spark. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in 1914 provided that spark, igniting the tinderbox of Europe and plunging the world into the Great War. That spark happened on a sunny June day in 1914 in Sarajevo, Bosnia. The city was bustling with life, its streets filled with people going about their daily routines, unaware that history was about to be made in the most tragic way. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, next in line to rule Austria-Hungary, was visiting the city with his wife, Sophie. They were there on a goodwill mission, hoping to strengthen the bonds between the diverse peoples of the empire. The couple was well liked, and their visit was meant to be a symbol of unity and peace. As their cars drove through the streets, a young man from Serbia named Gavrilo Princip shot and killed them both. Princip was a member of a nationalist group that wanted to break away from Austria-Hungary and create a greater Serbia. His actions were driven by a deep-seated desire for independence and self-determination for his people. This shocked all of Europe. The news of the assassination spread like wildfire, and the continent was gripped by a sense of disbelief and fear. Newspapers across Europe carried the headlines, and people everywhere were talking about the tragic event. Austria-Hungary, angry about the murder, blamed Serbia and made harsh demands. The government saw the assassination as a direct attack on its authority and a threat to its stability. They issued an ultimatum to Serbia, demanding that they take responsibility and meet a series of stringent conditions. Serbia, with support from its powerful friend Russia, tried to talk but wouldn't do everything Austria-Hungary wanted. Serbia was willing to negotiate but could not accept all the demands, as they felt some were unreasonable and infringed on their sovereignty. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of Slavic nations, backed Serbia in its stance. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, starting the chain reaction that would cause the war. The declaration of war set off a series of alliances and treaties that had been in place for years, pulling one nation after another into the conflict. Germany, because of its agreement with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia on August 1st. Germany had a long-standing alliance with Austria-Hungary and felt compelled to support its ally. The German government believed that a swift and decisive action was necessary to protect its interests and maintain its position in Europe. 2 days later, Germany declared war on France, Russia's friend. France, bound by its own alliances, was drawn into the conflict. The declaration of war on France was part of Germany's broader strategy to quickly defeat its enemies on multiple fronts. Germany planned to quickly attack France by going through Belgium, a neutral country. The invasion of Belgium was a key part of the Schlieffen Plan, a military strategy designed to avoid a prolonged two-front war by rapidly defeating France before turning to face Russia. This made Great Britain angry, as it had promised to protect Belgium. The violation of Belgian neutrality was seen as an unacceptable act of aggression, and Britain felt morally and legally obligated to respond. On August 4th, Great Britain declared war on Germany. The declaration marked the entry of another major power into the conflict, further escalating the situation and making a large-scale war inevitable. The Great War had begun. What started as a regional conflict quickly spiraled into a global war, involving nations from around the world. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark that ignited a powder keg of tensions, alliances and rivalries that had been building for years. Section 4. The Descent into Chaos, 1914 to 1916. At the start of the war, many people thought it would be over quickly. This wasn't true. Germany attacked Belgium, but their attack stalled, and the Western Front became a terrible network of trenches. Trench warfare became the symbol of World War I's horrors. Soldiers on both sides faced terrible things, bombs exploding all the time, sickness and the constant fear of dying. Small gains in territory came at a huge cost in lives. Battles like Verdun and the Somme became known for their brutality and pointlessness, with hundreds of thousands killed for almost nothing. On the Eastern Front, the war was just as bad, but involved more movement. Huge armies fought across Eastern Europe and millions died. Russia, though it had many soldiers, had poor leaders and bad equipment. Germany, though outnumbered, fought well and caused many Russian casualties. The Eastern Front would be very important, but not in the way anyone expected. Section 5. New Players, New Horrors, 1917. The year 1917 changed the war. Two big things happened that changed everything. First, the United States joined the war. The US had stayed out of the fighting, but Germany's submarine attacks on ships, even those carrying regular people, made Americans angry. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany, helping the Allies. The second big event was the Russian Revolution. Years of war had hurt Russia badly, and in March 1917, the Tsar, their ruler, was forced to give up power. A new government was formed, but it was overthrown in November 1917 by the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin. The Bolsheviks wanted to end the war, so they made a deal with Germany in March 1918, giving Germany land for peace. The Russian Revolution changed the war a lot. Russia left the war, and this allowed Germany to move its soldiers to the Western Front. The war was now even more brutal.